Hello and welcome to the Ramblings of a 42-Year-Old Man, and today's episode is going to be over the just recently ended HBO Max series, His Dark Materials. We'll cover the source material, the novels that it's based off of, and the 3 seasons that premiered on HBO, some of the cast, character, and storylines, and just ramble a little bit about the show. So His Dark Materials is a 3-season HBO Max, also BBC in the UK television series that just wrapped up its final 3rd season the very end of last year. Actually, in the US, it ended in December. The UK actually just finished its last airing of its episode the first week of February. So these are based off of a 3-part novel trilogy by Phillip Pullman. Originally came out back in 1995, was the first novel. And this one is kind of you could almost call it young adult, at least at the beginning, the first book probably, but it definitely goes into some themes and some choices that make it a little more, a little more adult than maybe your normal young adult series. And the show carries it on. The show is a very faithful adaptation of these 3 books. And it does a very great job. The 3 books I enjoy, but I actually think I enjoy it more as a television format than just reading it. It definitely, a lot of the imagery and stuff is really good, and it comes forward a lot better on the TV show. So again, based on the book series, the first book coincides with the first season of the show, and that is The Golden Compass is what it's called here in the US. In the UK, it was called The Northern Lights. They changed the name when it came to the US for reasons I am not sure of, but season 1 of the show covers that first book, and the series as a whole, it follows the coming of age of 2 children, Lyra Belacqua and Will Perry, as they wander through a series of different parallel worlds in this universe that they're in. And season 1 is focused a lot more on Lyra primarily than Will. But, you're set in a parallel world where a person's soul is actually manifested in an exterior form of like a animal companion. And when you're a child, this animal can take many different forms and is always kind of changing depending on the need or of what's going on. And then as you become an adult, that animal companion gets into their final form. Where they will stay as you're an adult. And so that is kind of the biggest difference between this world and our world, is the soul living in this companion form. So we follow Lyra, who is a kind of orphan, at least at the beginning of the novel. We are led to think she's an orphan. She certainly does not know what happened to her parents. And she is living in Jordan College in the city of Oxford, kind of a British town. I think it's supposed to pretty much resemble our Oxford University area in England. And she has a friend named Roger who ends up going missing, and she spends the majority of the rest of the book and the rest of the season hunting after Roger. She travels through with a group of people called Egyptians. She meets an armored polar bear named Yorick Burnison. She meets a flying aeronaut who has a balloon named Lee Scoresby. Her uncle, Lord Asriel, is kind of tied into the fate of this boy, and she's hunting them. A companion of hers that adopts her for a time, named Mrs. Coulter, is also tied into there, and there will be a lot of interactions and a lot of surprises between all of those characters throughout the series. And so Will is in a little bit in the show. In the first book, Will does not get introduced until the 2nd book of the trilogy. But instead of waiting for a whole season before introducing him, they bring him onto the first season of the show, kind of as a side story. We see him in our world, a parallel world to Lyra's world, and he is taking care of his mother, and he has lost his father, who's disappeared on an expedition, and that's kind of the base for Will here at the beginning. So that's season 1 of the show, and then it is followed. The season 1 premiered in 2019, and then season 2 was released a year later. So season 2 of His Dark Materials was based on the 2nd novel of the trilogy, called The Subtle Knife. This one is much more of a intertwined story between Lyra and Will. continues the adventures of Lyra as she's investigating other worlds. She ends up meeting Will in one of these other worlds, and throughout the rest of the season, included actually the rest of the series, it is really Lyra and Will's travels across these different worlds as she's kind of hunting her the Lord Asriel figure from the first one. She's kind of after him, and Will is on a hunt for his father, who may or may not still be alive. And so he's traveling through worlds for that. She's traveling through worlds with him, and a lot of stuff happens with Lord Asriel and Mrs. Coulter, and no spoilers coming today, so I'm not going to get into it too deep, but there's a lot of that where the first book was more about the fantasy world of Lyra's world. The second one is much more about jumping through a couple different worlds, and we start to get a little bit more of the backstory about what is going on in this series as a whole. So season 2 of the show came out December of 2020, I believe it was. It only ended up being 7 episodes. Season 1 was the full 8. Season 2, the reason there was not 8 and there was only 7 is because there was supposed to be an episode centered all around the Lord Asriel character, but because of COVID, as we've heard many times, kind of put a halt to being able to make that last episode. The 7 episodes we did get, the reason why there wasn't much of an issue with getting them together was since we are kind of revolving the story about 2 younger actors, who I believe their ages are like 15 or 16 around this time. They filmed a lot of the second season pretty quickly after filming the first season. So a lot of the filming for these parts was done before we had COVID hit. So we end up with 7 episodes for season 2 instead of the 8. They still do a pretty good job of getting all the story that we need to have in there. It doesn't feel like you're missing out on anything, so that's good. So again, that's December 2020, and then the final season ends up just coming out December of just last year, 2022. So the 3rd season just released in the U.S. We actually got 2 episodes each week in December of last year. The UK, they did a 1 episode per week format, and they just wrapped up the very first week of February, just a couple weeks ago. And so season 3, it draws together everything that's kind of been going on. Lyra and Will continue their journey. There's a war rages across these different worlds, led by Lord Asriel. Miss Coulter is poking around with a bunch of different stuff, and yeah, you end up with some interesting revelations, and of course, it wouldn't be a book series if it didn't have a little bit of a heart-pulling ending, but especially 2 younger characters that you've kind of seen growing up, because by this point, season 3, the characters, the actors themselves, it's been about a 4 to 5 year journey for these guys. You've seen them growing up. It's pretty cool. So with that, I'm going to get into a little bit of the cast that we had. So Lyra Belacqua, she's played by Daphne Keane, who most people would recognize as Laura or X-23 in the movie Logan, the final Wolverine movie we got with Hugh Jackman. She's the little girl who's a clone of Wolverine in that movie. And so she's on here. She's playing Lyra. Every episode of all 3 seasons, she is very prominent. She is definitely the main character. She will be seen soon in a new Star Wars show that's going to be coming out called The Acolyte. She signed on to star in, so that'll be pretty cool. Will Perry, he is played by Amir Wilson. I have not seen him in stuff before. I did look up that he was in a recent version of The Secret Garden that came out back in 2020. He played the character of Dickon. And then there's a lot of the side characters we will recognize. There's a lot of good British actors in here. But James McAvoy is Lord Asriel, famously Professor X in a bunch of X-Men movies. Ruth Wilson plays Mrs. Coulter. Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton fame plays Lee Scoresby. And a lot of faces that you recognize. If you've watched Game of Thrones, you'll recognize some faces as you're watching this series. So a total of 23 episodes over 3 seasons. Follows the books very, very closely. I would say probably one of the best faithful adaptations of a book series that I've seen in a long time. The books kind of fit into being able to be a televised format. You know, I could see if you're doing a movie series based on 3 books, you might have to cut corners. But with, a 7 or 8 episode TV show, you're able to really get almost everything out of the books on screen. And so it's pretty cool. So just wrapped up again. Last time we had in the U.S. was December, wrapped up in the UK in February. It is currently able to be seen in the U.S. on HBO Max. It's how my wife and I just watched all 3 seasons. And it's a great show. Loved it a lot. Very fun. The fantasy elements are great. It's not overly dramatic like a Game of Thrones or The Last of Us. It's a little more fun, a little more just enjoyable watch without getting bogged down in a lot of the heavy stuff. A lot more fun. So that's his Dark Materials. I hope you would enjoy it if you try watching it, and we will talk to you soon about some other ramblings. Thank you for watching.